So we're just going to wait for a few more people to join, and then we're going to get started for those that have joined already. Just wait a couple more minutes. I know some people struggle getting into the GoToMeeting piece, the downloading the app and so on. So I'll just wait about another 2 minutes before I kick off. Thanks. Great. I think we've got a couple more there just joined. So I'll get started. So first of all, welcome to joining the webinar today. We're going to be talking about severe weather events and some of the things we can provide using Everbridge during those events and how they help. We're going to be looking at how we detect and assess threats, and how you may want to, and certainly talk to and show some of these things, like locating impacted employees or volunteers, and your assets, things like buildings, or maybe even vehicles, and even your suppliers or reputation. Anything can be sort of impacted by events such as weather. And then you need to obviously take quick, decisive actions and mitigate, eliminate the impact of that threat where you can, and evaluate those things to improve your risk resiliency. So we're going to be talking to some of these in more detail and showing at a high level, or talking to them in a lesser way. But one thing I would say is during this, there's bound to be some questions. So please do enter your questions in the chat, and we'll answer those at the end if we've got time. And if not, we'll make sure those answers are shared with everyone. But before we start getting into the detail here, I just want to introduce ourselves. So I'm Elliot Pittham. I'm one of the business solution directors. I'm acting as a field CTO in the APAC region. I work with customers all the time on the technical and the business side to map out solutions that will meet their business need for the solutions we typically provide. Lots of integrations and things like that. In my spare time, I sometimes work as a volunteer, as a first responder for one of the emergency services here in Australia, and mainly around flood, tsunami, and storm events. And clearly at the moment, this is very topical, as we all seem to be hit by big weather events currently. But let me let Michael introduce himself. So over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Elliot. Yeah, Michael Collar here. I'm the Director of Business Value Consulting and Global Field Services within our Business Solutions team here at Everbridge. I've been with the Everbridge family now for about 12 years. I was part of the NC4 team that was acquired by Everbridge about 3 years ago. Before that acquisition, I was an intelligence analyst, regional specialist, intelligence manager, and product manager. And then since the acquisition, I've been part of this business solutions team, along with Elliot, kind of working with our customers and prospects to understand, quantify, and communicate the value of Everbridge solutions, as well as maintaining kind of an informal position as a risk intelligence advocate within the organization. Happy to be with you.
Great. And so I think everyone would agree that this last year has certainly shown with frequent severe weather events how important it is today to be prepared, because whereas we may get the occasional one in the past, they seem to be coming fast in frequency, and certainly the last few months in this region. And one of the areas that an organization needs to look at is the risk intelligence and threat detection around that. So one of the key questions is, how do Everbridge customers consume things like weather intel or threat information to manage their critical events? So let's have a look at that in a demonstration. So yeah. I'm going to hand over to Michael to run
happy
that.
to do that, Elliot. Yeah, like I said, very topical. I've just been reading in the past couple of weeks here about the increased likelihood of another La Nina coming in the southern hemisphere, affecting in particular Australia over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. So obviously very topical indeed. So when we talk about risk intelligence within the CEM platform, the main way to consume that is within what we call our Visual Command Center, VCC visualization. This is kind of the single pane of glass for risk intelligence as well as asset information, and you can also escalate and activate your responses directly from this interface. The way that VCC is organized, the risk events themselves, the risk intelligence, are going to be effectively layers within this visualization, and there's two types of risk event layers or risk event channels that are available to our customers. The first is what we call automated layers. These are layers that we grab directly from the authoritative source. A lot of our weather data, our weather warnings, for example, are going to be examples of that. So if I just highlight the weather events taking place in Australia over the past week or so, you see a lot of flooding events here in New South Wales in particular, but the Southeast in general. Other ones like our earthquake feed come directly from the USGS in the US. And some of the hurricane or tropical cyclone layers that we have available. These are automated layers that come directly into our platform, directly from the authoritative source, and that has the obvious benefit of being very timely, but also very trustworthy. But the downside of these types of event layers is that they tend to be very narrow in scope, right? So to expand the scope, we also have what we call human in the loop risk intelligence, and those are primarily via our risk intelligence monitoring center, which is the old NC4 team that I used to be a part of. And there's several layers here that I'll just light up here as I'm talking. Different types of intelligence for different purposes, but the whole objective here is to provide timely, actionable intelligence on events that are happening in real time or near real time that are causing associated disruptions to Everbridge customers in the area. In addition to these types, we also have the Anvil layer as part of the Anvil acquisition that we made as well. So these are our human in the loop intelligence layers that involve that additional touch and judgment and analysis and research from our in-house risk intelligence team. That's a 70-person plus team based all over the world and in 6 different monitoring centers, 24/7, 365. Contribution to that risk intelligence. In addition, we also have integrations that are available. I don't have the integrations activated here in my environment, and by the way, my test environment may be a little bit different than what you're used to seeing in your environment. But do note that we do have the ability to bring in third-party integrations with other risk intelligence providers or other systems that you may be using that you can bring in as well. So when we talk about risk intelligence kind of within the platform and how to consume risk intelligence, I like to use examples. So severe weather is a great example to kind of show the power of the platform and how customers can use all of these different channels together in a way that adds a lot of benefit to the organization. So ideally, the best risk intelligence is proactive in nature, right? It provides foresight into events that are incoming before they actually happen. And actually, weather is a perfect example of that. So let's walk through kind of a typical use case for consuming weather risk intelligence within the platform here. And to do that, I showed earlier there's some events happening in Australia right now associated with weather. But what I'd actually like to do is actually go back in time a little bit to some very severe flooding events that were happening at the beginning of last month in Australia in particular. And the platform obviously allows you to do that. So you can go back in time, and I'll go ahead and I'll activate some of these layers associated with the flooding that were happening in particular in the Sydney area. So it's pretty typical, especially with these proactive layers, to use these to understand the potential impact of incoming weather. So with this weather feed in particular, if I just expand this, you'll see in the July 3 to 4 timeframe, lots of flooding related events coming directly from the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia. So flood warnings, major, minor, moderate flood warnings, specific areas that are affected, and so forth. And you can drill into any of these and get more information as reported by the Bureau of Meteorology within Australia. Now you can see what's affected, kind of the conditions that we're expecting in terms of water levels, the specific rivers, et cetera, associated with those. Okay, and these are great for, like I said, providing that proactive approach to kind of what's going on or what's coming. Okay, but when things actually kind of start going wrong, so to speak, we want to know more than just that it could flood or that it could rain heavily. We want to understand the actual associated disruptions, and this is where our human in the loop team kind of comes into play. So I'll start to light up some of these RIMC events, and what you'll see in the Sydney area is a major risk event that was created for both the flooding conditions and the associated disruptions, as well as the associated evacuation. So if I drill into that event back in early July, what we can see here are reporting not so much on the specific events themselves, but on the associated disruptions. And what you see here is the last version of that alert that went all the way until July 15th, but started July 2nd, as you can see here. So in total, our team issued 36 separate versions of this alert that continued to be updated as conditions develop. I'm just going to scroll down to the time frame that we're looking at here, July 3/July 4. You can kind of get a sense of what's going on in that area at the time. So they are reporting on where the flooding is taking place, the affected the rivers, and the warnings being issued by the authorities, but also reporting on associated disruptions, unfortunate casualty events, as well as people being ordered to evacuate, disruptions in public transportation, and things like that. That's really where kind of the interplay comes in with the automated government warnings and alerts telling you what's coming in the future, and our risk intelligence, our in-house risk intelligence team telling you what's happening now and what the associated disruptions are. Okay, now when an event is especially large, like the flooding event that we saw in Southeast Australia earlier, not only does the real-time team provide these types of updates into the conditions and the associated disruption, but we have a team called Tactical Resolution that can be activated in extraordinary events to provide even more understanding of what's happening. So what I'll do is I'll bring up just one of the layers that were created by our in-house team, and this is a team of in-house GIS team that's creating custom layers to help our customers better understand what's happening. So in association with this flood event, what happened was we were getting pretty good information from the Bureau of Meteorology about about flood conditions or flood warnings, but there are also significant associated evacuations with this event. And these evacuations, orders and warnings and such were coming from local authorities. And the local authorities were indicating areas that were to be evacuated. But there wasn't a kind of a geospatial element of that. There was no way to visualize that really well on a map, for example. So our GIS team consumed all of those evacuation orders and created custom layers on the map that customers could use to understand what areas were actually impacted. So if you see here, the different colors here, yellow is the evacuation warning, which is basically prepare for an evacuation, and red is an evacuation order, which means evacuate. So if I click into one of these, you can see the specific affected area, and that there's a specific orders coming from local authorities about who's evacuating where, when that evacuation is taking place, etc. So this is another layer in addition to weather conditions, in addition to those watches, warnings, and advisories, in addition to kind of the RIMC real-time information, just another layer that we're providing to our customers to kind of understand and contextualize what's happening. In addition to the risk events themselves, there's also really valuable contextual layers that are available to bring up during these conditions. Things like traffic conditions you can bring up to understand, an evacuation, for example, seeing what traffic conditions are, where roads might be closed are particularly useful to those that actually need to evacuate. So you can see that. Things like traffic cameras, road conditions, actual weather conditions themselves. So if I activate the weather for the weather conditions now, obviously it's not going to show the conditions as it was back then, but understanding kind of where what the road weather index is, where there is rain currently, where rain is going to be in the near future. These are all critical tools in helping advise your people that might be impacted by these types of events. Okay, so this is just how, and Elliot, I'll turn it back over to you now. This is how the different layers can interact with one another in a major situation, like a major flooding event.
That's great. Yeah, and so I guess other types of events, how would they be covered in the platform?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I mean, with major events, you can expect to see this kind of multi-layer interaction. One that's actually really timely right now that I'll go to show a little bit more is the tropical cyclone that's just passed over the Philippines. So if I activate our tropical cyclones layer here, you can see we are getting. I have to go to the current time so I can get the current ones. You can see the typhoon has just moved off of the northern Philippine coast, but is kind of en route to mainland China. So you can see how, for example, not only where it's projected to go, but what the wind speeds are likely to be. And these are all filterable layers that you can action within the platform as well. And then again, if I activate our RIMC event here, we can see this, the specific event talking about the storm itself, Florida in the Philippines, kind of what the conditions are, what the associated disruptions are, where it's likely to go in the future, etc. You can also see a lot of storm-related events, risk events within the Philippines, a lot of flooding events, a lot of evacuations associated with this event, and some power outage, some utility issues as well. As a direct result of this. So these large types of events, you can expect to see this kind of multi-layer kind of combination. But the RIMC also produces really granular, what we call hyperlocal risk intelligence, right? These are things that could be, well, if I just, let me see here, if I just extend it out here a little bit further over the past week and look at kind of Australia and New Zealand, we can see some, the different types of events that are being reported. There's a train derailment, a roadway closure, see lingering flood events, a hazmat-related explosion, industrial fire, things like that. and we can go kind of drill into each of these. And they're very hyper-local in nature. So everything that the RIMC reports out of our operation is geo-located to a specific address or a block if we can't get a specific address. So it's very hyper-local in nature. So you know exactly where it's happening, what's happening, and what the associated disruptions are. And then I talked about those other automated feeds earlier as kind of other types of events. But really, it's not just weather that's captured within the platform. It's what we call all hazards risk intelligence. So everything from a house fire to a major bush fire, everything from a local violent event, contained protest, all the way up to a military coup. Everything that could be impacting the safety and security of your people or the integrity of your business is something that our analysts are going to want to be reporting on.
Excellent. And what about responding to critical events, and how can you move from knowing about these, which is of course what you're showing, to actually responding? And
yeah, that's a great question, Elliot. So I mean, risk intelligence is only kind of one part of the initial know phase, right? There are bad things happening all over the world all the time, right? Most of the time they don't affect our organization. So the first thing that you need to do is understand how this could affect your organization, and that's through what we call correlation. You want to correlate a particular risk event to your business and understand how it affects your business. So if we go back up again and use the example of the typhoon forecasted to hit mainland China soon, if I activate some of my assets, you'll be able to see that I do have a collection of people in Hong Kong, in the general Hong Kong area. They're all within this kind of relatively minor expected wind zone where damage is possible, although not terribly likely. The one that I'm more concerned about is this orange or gold section here, where sustained winds are reaching 90 kilometers per hour. That's a significant, it has significant potential to cause damage. So what I can do within the platform is try to understand which of this clump of people is going or likely to be or forecast to be affected by this particular level of wind. And if I right click, I can add as an area filter, and I can bring up the specific, it'll show me of those 500 or so individuals in the Hong Kong area, 77 of them are within the path of those more extreme winds. The individual's name, the contact, phone, email, etc. So that's one way that we can correlate within the platform. Another way is with what we call alerting thresholds. So within, as part of kind of the initial setup within the system, you set thresholds for different risks. You're basically drawing radii or perimeters around your assets that are going to be different depending on the different types of risk and the different severity of that risk. So you can automatically be alerted when there's a correlation between those two, and those would show up in what we call the alerts here. So I think a couple of them popped up. They're not related directly to this presentation, but you can see a number of them here that have happened over just the past couple of minutes here. So you can see these are all events that have correlated threats with specific assets over the course of the past month or so. And you can use these to drive action as well. One of the actions that you're going to want to drive is what's called escalation. So what you can do is use, right, as we disable some of that noise there, you can use. I'm just going to narrow the search here so we can focus in on what we're doing here. So you can use this type of event to actually escalate into action, right? That correlation, I know there's something going on that needs my attention, that's affecting my employees, so what do I do about it? What I can do is actually create what's called launch a critical event. And this critical event will include various responses. I'm just going to launch a test one here. We'll call it typhoon. I'm going to label it with, I'll just do tropical storm, that's fine. And launch it. And what it will do is it will queue up various responses or actions that my organization is to take in response to this particular type of event. And it'll show me my affected assets, those individuals that I showed you earlier, but it will also queue up different types of responses. So in this particular one, it's what's called auto alert. So it's automatically created an alert that indicates that this typhoon, this event, is impacting my individuals and will notify a certain subset of stakeholders to notify them that that is taking place. Okay. We can also launch what's called incident communications. These are more escalatory in nature, directly from this user interface, as well as task lists. So we have a response associated with this tropical storms. You can create these templates for all of these communications and all of these tasks. And we've launched one of those that have particular tasks that need to be completed. It's auto-assigned those in this case, and we can keep up to date as those individuals make the responses that they were assigned. Okay, so you can escalate directly into action directly from this platform using that risk intelligence to fuel that response. To help keep your people safe and your businesses running.
And those little banners that keep coming up every now and again as you've been talking, are they just live things happening around the world, or?
Yep, absolutely. That's why when I lit up that alert, this alert thing, well, here, let me just drill into that. There were so many because this is a demo system. We obviously have a lot of assets, but as things come up, you can see that, you know, with an alert, this is an example of an alert. It's showing, it's telling me that something's been correlated. There's been a threat that's been correlated to assets that I care about. So if I look at it, I get the summary of what's happening here. There's some sort of kind of police response, and our RIMC team is telling us that there's been a shooting in what is this? You know, it looks like the it's York, Pennsylvania, here in the United States. And it's giving me a link that I can look at to try to understand kind of what's happening here. But the system is telling me exactly who's affected by that. So I have some assets, some real estate offices there, some markets that I care about, other types of assets that are in the system, including buildings. So you can designate these different types of assets, whether they be travelers, employee addresses, buildings, suppliers, supply chain routes, etc. But yes, Elliot, to answer your question directly, there is stuff happening right now constantly, and as those banners pop up, that's the system as we've set it up, notifying me and automatically doing some of that correlation for us, and perhaps in some cases automatically escalating these as well.
Yeah, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I know this was designed as a very quick overview today, and hopefully you've seen how Everbridge can be used in conjunction with things like risk intelligence and used in, you know, some of your planning. And, you know, whatever your roles, whether you have a planning role or an operational role, you're part of a response team, you know, you don't have to be part of an emergency service to, you know, as organizations, we have to plan for these events. Certainly when we have employees or volunteers, and you're responsible for their safety in what they're doing, whether they're working from home, like a lot of us are today, or on mobile, you know, maybe delivering or responding to particular things. So I think, you know, what we're showing here is just a small snapshot of what you can use and how you may configure the system. And as Michael pointed out, you know, this is a demonstration system, so he has everything turned on because he's helping us out here today. To, you know, tomorrow he's probably, you know, maybe doing something in the US, could be somewhere in Europe. So you can filter and turn on and off these things so that you don't have as much noise. And that's what Mike was doing during the demonstration. He was showing how we could sort of turn things on and off as we need to. So yeah, that's great in terms of showing that as a quick overview. I mean, one of the things that we want to avoid, lots of things can be automated in terms of communications, but what you don't want to do is swamp yourself with you know, noise, and so some assessment is often useful to say, well, what comms should we send out, things like that. So you saw Michael launching that critical event, and I think that's a key part there. Is you could automate that, based on something occurring near one of your assets. But there are times when you might want that human check and follow your defined standard operating practice or what's in your plans for those types of scenarios. Yep. So I'm going to move on now to this the final piece, which is just some questions. And we do have a couple, Michael. I'll probably ask you them. Sure. So one question here is, you showed the risk feeds and intel, but my organization also has its own monitoring place specific to our industry. Can we push our risks and monitoring into VCC?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier, this is intended to be a single pane of glass system, right? So we've designed this to ingest various external third-party feeds to complement what's already in here. So we could certainly implement one of our existing integrations, or we could build or advise you on how to build that own integration. There is the potential to enter directly within the system something called operator entered risk. So that's something that you can create yourself to be an internal event. If you say, there's some sort of alarm on site, what I can do is I can create an event myself. I can place it, let's say in Columbus, Ohio. I'll make the associated affected area very small, and I can actually type out and create my own type of event, and it will show up on the map just the same as any other risk event that's reported by the RIMC or any of our other authoritative sources. You can see that created right here. That's one way to do that, or we could integrate directly within, right into those other systems that I mentioned earlier.
Right, excellent, that's great. And I guess, so there's one here, interesting one. How does Everbridge Risk Intelligence differ from other products or competitors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we try to focus on, there are a number of providers kind of within the enterprise risk intelligence space. Where we try to focus is providing actionable risk intelligence to our customers. And what I mean by actionable is kind of the intersection between several factors. Timeliness is certainly one of them. That's why we call these real-time risk events from our risk intelligence monitoring center, and that's the reason why they operate 24/7, 365 in so many different centers around the world. But timeliness isn't the only factor. We want to make sure that we're being comprehensive and we have good sources so that we're reporting on what's actually happening. The second one is being specific with locations. Making sure that we're geolocating to a specific spot and not just saying there's a shooting in Columbus, for example, or a stabbing in Auckland, that we can geolocate that to a specific place because it's obviously going to be very relevant to a business that's across the street and not so relevant to a business that might be across town, right? The trustworthiness of that intelligence is important to us as well. We vet only authoritative sources that we develop in-house. And then finally is the indication or the insight into the associated disruptions. What we don't want to do is serve up a piece of risk intelligence that you then have to go chase down to understand kind of what the secondary impacts are, okay? If there is some sort of security event, is it causing associated roadway closures? Is there an evacuation order in place? What's going on? We want to include all of those and bring all of those elements together so that when you see our alert, you can take action immediately. You don't have to go do anything else. What we find in talking to a lot of our customers is that some of the other providers in the marketplace, especially those that are more, AI focused, don't have humans in the loop, for example, provide a lot more volume. Is the customers have to take so much action in order to reach that point of actionability that although they may have received the alert a minute or two sooner before our RIMC reported it, they spent 10 or 15 minutes trying to understand all of those other points that I just talked about that RIMC is delivering up right away. So we're really focusing on providing actionable intelligence for our customers as opposed to just being the fastest or just reporting the highest amount of volume.
Excellent.
It's a good question.
That's good for me to understand as well, because you've got much more depth on that whole risk side and what we offer compared to others. So that's the last question Yeah, just double checking. Oh, 1 second. There is one more. How do respondents to an action provide an update on the status of their actions? Is there an audit trail or log for incidents up to the closure of the incident?
Yes, so you're talking about the actual action taken on so after an event has been escalated, what happens? Yeah, there are various ways within the platform, and Elliot, please feel free to jump in here to answer it if I'm not doing a good job. But there are various ways to respond, to add notes to different actions, and certainly to track the actions that are taken. Everything is audited within the platform, so you can create dashboards, after action reports to track what happened specifically, who took what action at what time. So you have a full log of that. Elliot, you want to correct me or add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the things I've seen that's very effective is using the Everbridge mobile app for live. So you can send out, tasks to individuals, but get them to give you sit reps. And that's one of the really important. I mean, if there's one thing, I know operationally is when you're on the ground, if you've got people with the option to be able to feedback situation, updates to that task you gave them, how long's, maybe an ETA, you can actually on the fly create what we call trackers and push them out to teams to report back what they're seeing, which is particularly good. And, when you do have teams out in the field, or you're trying to get an update from, say, a department or a branch or whatever that is. So the mobile app definitely I've found very effective in that space. And as you were saying, Michael, the dashboards themselves, you can provide management level or very focused group level dashboards on the fly during one of the critical events, and that allows you to see real time what's going on. And as people are responding on the mobile app or updating parts of the system elsewhere, it's all being fed into that dashboard. So we all love a dashboard, and certainly our customers seem to love those too. So yeah, I think that's the only question I've got now. So we've run over a little bit of time, but thank you very much for joining everyone today. As I say, this was only meant to be a brief snapshot. We are going to be doing more of these sessions in different areas of our services, but please do reach out to us if you'd like any more information. And thanks for joining, and thank you, Michael. That was an excellent demonstration.
Great to be here. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks.